Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar spotlighting the awesome collaboration between ProtoPie and the Washington Post. During today's webinar, we will check out the sleek vertical video feature used in the Washington Post app, a game changer in how users interact with the news. Stay tuned to see how ProtoPie is helping shape interactive storytelling at the Washington Post, making news more engaging than ever. I am Yulia, and today I will be your host. Allow me to introduce you to my colleague, Rebecca Carreras, a customer success manager here at ProtoPie. Rebecca, please say hi.
Hello, everyone.
Good to have you here, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Today's webinar features leader name in journalism, The Washington Post. Allow me to introduce you to Emily Mingilio, senior product designer at The Washington Post. Emily, would you like to say hi?
Hi, everyone.
Hi. After her amazing presentation, Emily will be joined by Brian Alfaro, a design lead at the Washington Post, to answer your questions during our live Q&A session. Brian, would you like to say hi?
Hi, everyone.
Cool. Now, let's go briefly over today's agenda. In the first part of our webinar, Rebecca will briefly go into what makes ProtoPie such a strong tool for high-five prototyping. Her introduction will be followed by Emily's presentation. Emily will show us how designers at the Washington Post use ProtoPie to craft visually engaging stories for their users. After that, we will kick off the live Q&A. As always, we encourage you to participate actively during the Q&A session to make sure that we make the most out of this webinar, right? So feel free to use the Q&A window to ask your questions, and we will cover them at the end. Okay, then, without further ado, I think we can get started. Rebecca?
Yep, let me share my screen. I will start introducing ProtoPie briefly. Okay. Can you guys see the full screen?
No, if you click slideshow, I think we should be able to see it.
Yeah. Okay, this is taking some time. Okay.
Okay, there you go.
Perfect. Yeah. So, well, I'm very glad to be again able to introduce ProtoPie. I think it has been a while. So I'm gonna briefly explain what is ProtoPie and also everything that you can achieve with it. There are a lot of things you can do, but I will try to highlight the most important. So first of all, a curious fact, actually, where the name ProtoPie comes from is from prototyping as easy as pie, which actually is behind the philosophy of the creation of ProtoPie. ProtoPie was created with the mission of lowering the barrier that comes when designers try to use new user experience. So we know that coding is really hard. Most of us, are not familiar with it. So ProtoPie got rid of coding, which makes it a really nice tool to go to, especially if you want to achieve high fidelity prototyping. Okay, so ProtoPie is actually a whole. It's not only one product, but first we have ProtoPie Studio, where with the plugins that we have, you can import your designs, from your most favorite design tools, such as Figma, Adobe XD, and Sketch. And then in ProtoPie Studio is where all the magic happens. You start adding triggers and responses to the objects that you have, be it layers, image assets, etc. And then you start crafting really amazing interactions and start giving life to your prototypes. So once you're done creating your prototypes, you can actually test them on your final devices. You can test it on mobile and tablet. And this is thanks to the ProtoPie Player app that we have. With this, you can test, with your real keyboards, use your built-in cameras, and also use the native sensors of your cell phones. So this allows you to have the real experience, because that is what ProtoPie does. It creates final product-like prototypes. And then we also have ProtoPie Cloud, where it is where you can store your prototypes. You can also collaborate with your team, using projects and within the same team space. And not only that, but you can also conduct moderated user testing that is still under beta for some enterprise users, but we also have the option to create handoffs, to improve the communication between designers and developers. And okay, so I said I'm going to mention some advantages that you have when creating prototypes in ProtoPie. So first, a big advantage of it is like you can do cross-device interactions. As you can see in these examples, you are able to control home appliances. For example, with your smartphone, you can control your oven or your washing machine, as you can see here. And not only that, but for example, if you want to create a parcel delivery experience, you can also use your smartwatch and one of our features of barcode scanning. And also, as you can see below here, it is a kiosk, right? You can make a payment. You can get a payment experience just using your smartphone. So all these are real world scenarios that actually ProtoPie allows you to build. Okay, I'm gonna do something fun that last time our CEO made. So I'm gonna make you test some prototypes because ProtoPie also supports multimodality. So I would like you to download the player. You have these two QR codes, one for Android and the other one for iOS. So I'm gonna give you some minutes to download the player. Maybe some of you already have it, but for those that are new, yeah. Let us know when you have the app ready and we can go to the next slide. How is it going? Ready? Okay. Yeah. Okay, then. Ready? Okay, many people is ready. So let's go there. Now we have these two prototypes. All you have to do is, oopsie, sorry. Okay, back to this slide. Okay. So you can try any of these two prototypes just by scanning the QR code. On the left side of the screen, you have this prototype where you can use voice prototyping. So you can try talking to it, saying, hello, Avery, and then give it a command like, give me the weather or play a song. And you'll see that, yeah, it works just like a real product. And then the other prototype is a game. So what you have to use here is tilt in order to move or control the movement of that little jet or airplane. And then if you want to shoot, you just tap on the screen. How is it? Are you guys trying it now? As we tilt, right? Yeah. So this is what ProtoPie actually allows you to do, right? These are native sensors, the multimodality, allowing to do voice prototyping, and all these, again, like real world scenarios. Okay, fun. I think Julia will share maybe the links to these prototypes so you can, test them later whenever you have more time. And if you want to download them, that's also great. So you can see what interactions we use there. Okay, let me jump to the next one. So not the last one because we have a lot of other features, but ProtoPie also allows you to do hardware integration. As you can see in this example, you can use this music player, like you can select each of these albums and make them play on a real physical device. This is awesome, right? This was created using Arduino. So yeah, this and more you can create with ProtoPie. So again, like if you are not unsure, if you're not sure yet of what you are able to achieve with ProtoPie, or you have something in mind and you want to know whether it is possible, you can reach out to us anytime. We'll be more than happy to give you a demo or explain you how you can achieve those. Again, thank you so much for this time. And then I'm going to give the floor to Julia to present our next host. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rebecca, for reminding us why ProtoPie is the go-to tool for hi-fi prototyping. Yeah, I will share the links for the two prototypes in the chat in just a second. I am pulling those out. And yeah, now it's time for Emily Mingilio at the Washington Post to show us how designers in her team, including herself, use ProtoPie to craft the visual storytelling. So yeah, go Emily. Looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you so much, Julia. And thank you, Rebecca, for walking us through all the things ProtoPie can offer. I'll share my screen. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Today we'll be looking at talking about crafting visual storytelling. This is the Washington Post's approach to ProtoPie and the prototyping we do for visual experiences. In our time today, I hope that you'll take away just a few things. I'm going to do a little intro about who I am and the team that I work with, what problem that I was solving using ProtoPie, what my takeaways are and why I use ProtoPie in my day-to-day. I'll show you a prototype of the experience that we ended up working on. And we'll leave time at the second half of this webinar to answer any questions people might have. So hi, I know Julia's already introduced me, but my name is Emily Mingilio. I'm a senior product designer at the Washington Post. It's great to meet you all. I work specifically on our native app, working in what we would call like strategic focuses, specifically in discovery and story experience. Discovery experience focuses on like our homepage features. It drives like user engagement. We think of new things that might bring how we would bring content to our users and help build like habitual behaviors with them. Story experience is more about like how our users like read our articles and engage with our content at the post. I also do work on our design systems. I'm currently building out our apps design library, and I contribute in my like free time some iconography for the work, but I also work closely with Brian. So Brian will join us at the end, but if you want to say hi, Brian. So as we dive in, I want to provide like a little bit more context about how we work at the Post. As a designer, in general, it's our goal to validate hypotheses and provide solutions that meet our users' needs. Our product design team works really closely with product and engineering, but we partner really closely with our editorial colleagues. At the time, I was working really closely with our head of platforms and curations. So that like role means that she leads a team that works on content that would live within the interactions and the UI design. So like they're working on like the content that's like within the screen, whereas maybe like I'm the one designing the screens. And so this ends up adding like a really interesting point of view to how we work and how we because like the user ends up being both like the consumer of the news, but also the person that's creating the news. So the editorial folks. So they're so ingrained in the work that we're doing, it's really important to make sure that we bring them along in our journey as designers. So while I end up using user testing with users, it's also important for me to show and test the reactions of our stakeholders. And so this means like a little bit like less hand waving, like, can you imagine like what you're seeing, and also like showing them, which is why we end up doing like high fidelity prototyping. So the problem that I was solving, for this project, we were seeing that like our younger readers were increasingly getting their news from like short informational videos when you think of things like Instagram or YouTube, or more recently TikTok. And so our newsroom creates, but even like before this, like a lot of compelling visual storytelling. And like we weren't doing as good of a job as we could to present this content in a way that like would feature it prominently and be dynamic like within our app. So we wanted to create something that would like bring people to like our homepage and get them to stay there and kind of like dive in a little bit deeper within our app. So who are we solving this for? In general, a lot of our work at the Post is for our subscribers, but there's usually like a hypothesis of like why we're solving this and who we're solving this. So for this problem, we were trying to create like an experience that would like for our subscribers that would increase the amount of users that would be able to experience the visual storytelling on our app and appeal to users who use this experience, like use these types of experiences or see similar things on other platforms. So the idea is that if we like implement a video experience, we'll bring subscribers back. It'll increase like how long they spend time like within the app, but also bring them back to us. And kind of like create that like habitual pattern that you'd see like on social media or how they would be experiencing it elsewhere. So why ProtoPie? I think like in general, like prototyping is a means to like validate like an idea, maybe like test out, experiment, like what you're working on. Prototyping can be like a fast way to do that and kind of like see if this like idea works without like wasting the resource of like launching something, but you can kind of like bring it to life as well. And I think like one of the questions would be like, could this have been done with a low fidelity prototype? Maybe, but I think that like with this kind of scenario, using ProtoPie is really important because you can like actually bring those like little interactions to life. So like as an apps designer, a lot of my work relies on the small interactions and thinking about how the user engages with the feature. So like as I've explained in like the problem that we're solving, like for both the stakeholders and for the users, like the higher fidelity prototype ends up being really necessary for the work. It helps me like bring my vision to life. It helps me think through like the problem that I'm solving, like the little interaction points, but it also like helps me bring it to the people that I'm working with. Again, like you don't want to like hand wave and try to be like, oh, like maybe you can imagine this is like what it would look like. But I want people to actually be able to like understand and see like what I'm communicating. So for our team, there are three takeaways of like why higher fidelity prototyping has been really successful for us. It's about how it meets the user's needs and how it meets our needs and goals as designers. But then it's also how we can sell these ideas to our stakeholders. So when I talk about user needs, on our team, there's definitely like a balance between creating something that's like both delightful and would like meet our business need. So there's usually like a product brief that's related to the work that we're solving that covers things like what's the user story, what is like the problem we're solving, maybe what's the pain point that we've heard. And there's a lot of collaboration between us as designers and the product managers that are working on whatever feature or like project that we're like solving for. I also like in general want to make sure that like we are advocating for the user and like what they want to see happen. So like while we do get like a lot of feedback from the app, like through reviews, I want to be able to have something that can like go to users like in testing and see if they like might be able to provide an explanation of what they're asking for. So diving deeper into just like, this is like how I feel about this, like from a review, but like, why do they feel that way? And like, what could we do to change it? So using a higher fidelity prototype, it kind of helps me check like how I'm advocating for the user, but also check like, is my idea solving for that problem? And it assures that like I achieve like what our like product business goal is. And it also lets me solve for it in like a creative way. So when it comes to the user testing, it's been really helpful to be able to give like the users the real experience to see like how exactly they might react to something that would be released. In this scenario, the project that we worked on, it did like fully pass, like what we'd say fully pass usability testing. So all the users that we tested with gave it like thumbs up. They understood like how they would interact with the screen. They also told us that they would like expect an immersive experience. I think that when we first started this project, there was a space where like, oh, would it just be like a looping carousel, kind of like what you might see on like, I think more on like Facebook or like YouTube. But they like did express that having that like immersive experience that takes over your screen, that they're able to like flip through things was really important to them. They also described like kind of like some of like the little pieces that maybe you would think about, but like just like putting it out there of like, oh, they wanted to see like a play button. They want to know about like the time. They want to see like, they wanted to like react to like what you are doing on the screen. And I think like overall, people knew that like how they would like swipe between the experience, and also like explain like things that maybe like we weren't thinking about. And so having that like prototype where they could kind of click and see like what might happen rather than again like hand wave to them or be like, oh, maybe this would happen. Like we do a lot of unmoderated testing, so it makes it easier for them to be able to like react to that and us be able to then listen to their responses. So my second takeaway was about these designers' needs. So as a designer, like I want to be able to accomplish like what I set out to design. Like I want to be successful and like be able to solve the user problem, be able to create a solution that feels like delightful and something that we can see like a lot of impact on when it's on our app. So having this prototype helps me communicate what's happening like in my head, whether it's to my design leads, to my team at critique, or to like my engineers when I'm trying to explain like what I want the animation to look like, or when I'm bringing this to my stakeholders for review. So it gives some tangibility to my idea and allows me to test things out. And also like lets other people like hold it in their hands so they can like see like what I've dreamt up. And it helps me like think through and honestly sometimes backwards engineer like what I want that end state to be, and what I expect to happen. So this like allows me to be a better communicator and to show off like what I would describe as like my vision to each one of my stakeholders. So that last takeaway, and I think that's like is a little bit more like common to like the work that we do like with these like with the editorial colleagues, but it's to sell to the stakeholders. So like that feeling of holding design or the prototype in your hand, like when we did present this work and had this high fidelity prototype, there was like a moment of excitement. Our stakeholders are like known for like if they are really happy about something, it'll just like be dead silent. But that's like good because you can like sense that like excitement of like them seeing it and like understanding what you're thinking of. But it also helps like if I brought this idea fully to life, like I'm not wasting resources. Like if for some reason it didn't click with them, then they'd be able to be like, okay, here's our feedback. We can go back, prototype, and work quickly through that so that you're not like launching something that maybe doesn't drive user engagement or doesn't like succeed in what we're trying to achieve. It also like I think it's really important to help bring people along like in your journey, whether it's like showing someone like your process and critique, or like again bringing those stakeholders as like part of like your process as a designer. So it's like a little bit of like pulling back that curtain and showing them like this is how I got here and like this is what I was thinking about. So I've been able to like use this prototype as a way, like specifically with ProtoPie, to like reveal like the magic of my vision. And now I'm going to switch screens and show you a little bit of this prototype that I've been talking about. So I'm going to try to multitask and talk as I switch screens, but the prototype that I'll show you is for this like vertical video experience. And generally the goal of the project was for us to like showcase, hold on, I want to believe I can multitask this, but 1 second.
Take your time.
Okay.
Yeah, so in the meantime, yeah, don't be shy. Go over to the Q&A and leave any questions, design, Washington Post related, ProtoPie related. Now it's your chance.
Awesome. Thanks, Julia. Okay, if everyone can see my whole screen, I think that you should be able to okay, awesome. Then you can see like kind of like the space that we worked in within ProtoPie and then also like the preview on the side. So as I've said before, the goal of this project was for us to highlight what we call like our vertical videos or video explainers. So they would be things like these like large vertical videos. And they're usually like reporters talking like deeper about a specific topic. Maybe it like dives into like what's happening in the world. They can be something like light, but also like really like hard-hitting news. And as I mentioned before, we wanted this experience to be a little bit more like the Instagram Reels or TikTok. So this experience might feel kind of similar to that. This prototype would have been like when we would have been working on this, it would have been like right after we created like the assets within Figma.
American snowboarder show.
Well, that's showing you a little bit ahead. We have it programmed so you can both like mute and unmute and also like play and pause. But we worked in like a lot of these components in Figma and then exported them into ProtoPie. So within it, you saw the carousel. Let me restart it. So this is what we would call like the vertical video carousel. So within the carousel, there's like baked in logic at like our component level. So we built out like a little bit of a library. And so within that carousel, there's like signals to tell you whether like the video is in focus or out of focus. So you might see like would be called like on blur. I can probably show you that in here, but so there's like these different elements of like the carousel and having some of those like details like on the side here within ProtoPie. So what that does is it tells like the carousel like which video is like in focus or not. There's also like a little bit of signaling and like messaging about this timestamp. So like ProtoPie is able to tell you like how long the video is, like read it, and then like that's like why that timestamp would like tick down. And so by creating this carousel item, it makes like really reusable and then also allows like swap in different like videos and thumbnails. So now that I have like this item, we're able to build out like a whole like set, like create a series. And so within that, it will then like paginate, like so that ProtoPie will count and like tick along like as you go through each video. it'll know like that you're on video 1 versus video 2 versus video 3. And that's important because when you click in, it'll reorder how the videos, like what you'll be swiping through. So being able to detect that, and then also like detecting whether it's like assigned, if it's in focus or not. So then after we've like built all those components, you have like what would be like the parent of like all these components that they're feeding into, which is our main scene within ProtoPie. So this receives both like that number, that counting, that index of like what number screen we're on of the component. It also like we're able to like add in the video into the main scene. So that's like where we would like update like which video explainers we want to include within ProtoPie. So you can see all those here. And then also like adding in those thumbnails, and then it produces the experience. So that's like what you see playing in the preview over here. So because we, like I said, because we know like what that index is, when you click play, I really hope it doesn't play again for me, but maybe it'll play some more sound. Yep. Okay. It will play sound. You saw that like, because it's the first one, this is like the video that starts here. As you swipe up, it then goes to the second video and the third video. Whereas if you were on like video 3, it would start with this one, and then it's now reordered itself to play you like a different order. It's now reordered itself to play like a different order as you like swipe through. You'll notice like the vertical video yourself as it keeps playing sound for me, that it like can mute and unmute, which I think is actually how like the experience works currently on the app. You can like pause and play. You notice that there was like some auto playing that's happening within the carousel. That's another element that we wanted to see. And then our scrubber also like actively moves as for you to like move throughout the video. I think at the beginning there was something, we had like a little like jump, which was a pretty simple, like just has like an arrow move up and down. It reminds you to like swipe more through the video. We found that like with in general, like within our app, giving users a little bit of like a nudge tends to help like engage them or get them to like move through our experiences. I think that's everything. Yeah.
Awesome. I was wondering if I can share. I know you shared the prototype with me. Can I share it in the chat? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
I'm gonna share this prototype that Emily just presented, so you can all test it on your phones. So yeah, make sure to check it out. Okay, then thank you, Emily, for showing us how designers at the Washington Post use ProtoPie for hi-fi prototyping. Okay, and now it's time to kick off the much-awaited Q&A. So let's head over to the Q&A window and try to answer some of these questions. Okay, so the way we're gonna do this is, yeah, I will cherry pick from the Q&A. I think we have plenty of time, so we'll try to address each one of them. So yeah, please stay tuned. Okay, let's start with the first one. Emily, how many designers are prototyping in your team? In my company, it's a voluntary task before the handoff, and most of my designers' peers tend to skip it. Do you have any tips for how to get your team members to prototype more?
Well, so our team is like a little less than 30 people, and everyone has access to our ProtoPie and like our workspace. So I think, as like you'd covered earlier, Yulia and Rebecca, of like there's like a collaborative space. We like definitely utilize that. I'd say maybe like 3 or 4 of us tend to use ProtoPie more frequently. I think it's like a little bit is like evaluating like what is like the benefit of it. Like for me, like I'm working with like a large set of engineers. And so something that is like a more complicated animation or a more complicated experience, like this is more beneficial to me so that I can like share it out. Like you can like get like the recipe and stuff. Like we've given that to like engineering before. And I found that really useful. I think maybe like my encouragement would be like, if they're not like, I mean, at minimum, they should be prototyping like through Figma, right? And if like, I would start there of like trying to like onboard people to that, or like we do things on our team where we kind of like feature work, or we like a morning meeting that like we kind of all gather and there's like a space for us to like share. And I know that's like a little bit of like culture building and stuff, but like that's a great space for like something like this for us to share out. Or like I think that within our team, like we're all very like open to helping each other. Like I've had teammates reach out that have like seen some of like the ProtoPie stuff and like gone and like sat with them, and sometimes like that helps with like kind of like a little bit of like like literal hand holding, but also like being able to like collaborate together. I think like it's sometimes scary if you're like, oh my God, like we're onboarding like a new software. I don't understand it, but really it could be that simple. Or I've found like Brian is like our design systems lead, and he's usually like my person if I'm like, I can't figure out like what this math is here, or like why is this conditional not working? Like, to be fair, we do sit next to each other, but like I'm able to then ask him of like, can we like work through this, or like explain to me like why my brain's not clicking on it? And I think that's made like taken down the barrier of like what people might find difficult about the prototyping. I think it's also like building in like a little time and space into your work. So like if you have like a tight deadline, that might be why like your team is like skipping it. Or like it could be that like, you know, there's not enough like in the project space, or like giving people more of like that room to like go explore, like invest in like a day of like getting to try out the software.
Amazing. Those are some really great tips for whoever is getting started with ProtoPie. If you're the only one prototyping, just, I guess involving and getting your team on board it makes the whole journey much, much easier. So a related question to that is, how did you and the Washington Post designers go about learning hi-fi prototyping? And I see Brian is answering that in written. So make sure to check out his answer. But Emily, if you have any tips, did you use any resources?
Yeah. I mean, I used it for, there were a couple projects I was working on that related to carousels. And so carousels tend to have like a lot of animation. And so I think initially, I know it's not ProtoPie, initially I used Principle for like one of them. And it was just, we had like a small interaction, but then we were building out like a larger carousel experience. And I actually don't remember like what brought our team to ProtoPie, but like for that, like a lot of it was just like experience. And I can let Brian answer that question, but it was a lot of just like when we did have it, having that like kind of getting to play with it. Like I think that in my process, I was given like a little bit of extra time to like work on this. And I learned through just like messing with the like ProtoPie as like a whole, but also like the YouTube videos. There's like tutorials, I think, on ProtoPie, like kind of just looking, you can like download other people's projects. Like I said, I like to backwards engineer. So like kind of like breaking it apart and seeing like how someone else did it, or like I'll look up like, oh, pagination, and like what did they do to paginate something. And I think like with this, there were like elements that we found, like there was like a stopwatch example for like the timer. Like that's kind of like how we were able to figure out that you could do that rather than like have it be part of like the video recorded. Brian, did you want to add there?
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna say we were early adopter of the early iterations of ProtoPie, and we were on off in terms of like the payment and being an actual subscriber. But yeah, we've always found it useful for a lot of animation that is requiring to be more complex. So when we think about like how did someone go about like learning, I answered in a chat, but we built a culture of learning, knowledge sharing amongst our designers, and we encourage our designers to have a platform to be able to say grab an hour on Friday or something. Everyone comes together and they're just really just showcasing a software or skill or something that they're doing, and it's a Q&A session just like this where we're answering more like, how did you do this, how did you do that? And what we hope to build here is like what we have been building here is more of a culture of learning where you have the space to learn on the job. And we think that when you have access to the tools, you have a way better capability of showcasing and presenting your work and delivering the design. So we find it is just as resourceful to spend time of learning as just as much as doing the work as well.
Exactly. So Roni Tonik is commenting, yeah, encouraging leadership to have a professional development budget is a huge too. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so someone is suggesting, Roni, to go through the questions from the most voted. So yeah, I encourage you to upvote the questions that you want answered most. I will try to follow that, but there are many questions who have like equal upvotes. So let's start with this one. Loyal Washington Post reader here. Question: how much do you estimate you save when doing hi-fi versus lo-fi prototyping? I want to try to convince my boss to purchase a team plan. That's that.
Yeah,
Brian, I might let you answer that one since I'm less in those weeds.
do the sales pitch for you right now. No, I think for us, what we found the use of prototyping with ProtoPie was more of where Figma fell short for us. I mean, a lot of times we found that designers needed to do like simple scroll animations, and I've been wishing that they, Figma had a simple way of doing it, but they don't have an easy, very like straightforward like scroll animation to know when something's scrolled offset, a certain amount. ProtoPie is very easy to do that. And we have done in recent a lot of like scroll animations that were requiring that knowledge or that kind of specific thing. And so we just kind of said, hey, a lot of our designers are kind of jumping through the hoops just to do this, and they're spending way more time just to do a simple thing when it could just be very easy with another software. The other piece was really the handoff piece. We found that, while we could build really great high fidelity prototypes in Figma and to like some degree, especially now with variables, what it didn't have was a good handoff in terms of like how things were really built. I think the scrubber and the kind of recipe is really game changer. I mean, recently we've launched a feature that had a very simple animation that could have been done in Figma, but there was no way of me telling them what the animations would be, what the timing was going to be. And I just built it really quickly in ProtoPie and shared that, and the developer nailed it like first try. Like they got the animation on point. So I think when we think about cost savings, we really think about the amount of time someone goes into like building out a prototype, but as well as for the developer and the designer back and forth. I would say has been a huge benefit for us, as Emily said. Handoff of like that recipe piece to be able to scrub it is very similar to if you ever use like your dev inspection tools on Chrome, you can scrub an animation. So it's very similar to that kind of feel. So that one-to-one has helped a lot in terms of like, I mean, if you look at developer salary and design salary and put time together, I'm sure you could sell it to your boss.
Okay, that's great, and thank you, Brian, for touching on like the whole designer and engineer collaboration, because we had also questions around how do designers and engineers collaborate at the post, and also how has the handoff feature been helpful for dev handoff when sharing prototypes? Has it been enough, or there's still more to be desired?
I mean, I think that like when we handed this off, like the recipe really, really helped. I think like my engineers are pretty like that I work with tend to be pretty like versed in being able like to figure things out like via Figma, or like we use Zeppelin to hand off like within our team so that they can like also see like some annotation and stuff. The way like our process works at the post, like there's usually like a designer that like works with like a specific team, or like there's like a couple that kind of like change in and out depending on like what projects we're on. Since I like am one of like two apps designers, we tend to mostly work with like the same engineers. And our process tends to like involve like a kickoff, which is like more of like an initial like let me show you like where we're at, like we're almost done, we're like ready to deliver, are we missing anything? And I think in that like this has also helped of being like, oh well, here's like a recipe, like is there anything that like is missing from this animation, versus like I'm pretty sure like in Figma you can't do any of that. It's a lot of like their guesswork, and then it's a lot more like on us as design to also be like, well, I intended for like this animation to happen and like it's not like fully happening, but like if I again like hand wave like did this like screen like maybe like sort of like switch between like they then have to do like a lot more work there. My engineers also like don't mind like sending me a Slack being like, hey, can you like huddle, like can we like talk through this? And I think like having this actual animations like helped for me to like also like go back and reference of like this is like what I was thinking, this is like what the animation should look like, kind of like pulling apart some of those components and seeing like what is happening within them, like how is it like zooming in, zooming out, or like I don't know, even like some of those little bits, or like even like super super small, like those like little interactions, like we'll have like we have like dot pagers, and so like when it paginates, like that was a lot easier to do in ProtoPie than it is to do in Figma. Like Figma, it's like multiple screens, whereas like that is just a component, and you can have it like switch between those dots, and I can then show them like this is what I'm intending for it to look like, and this is how that animation should line up. So I think that's like generally how our dev handoff is. Like we'll have like links ever like in like a Confluence somewhere for them to be able like in like a document for them to be able to find it. But it tends to be like a lot of like conversation, I think, afterwards.
Right. Yeah, so Emma's saying developers appreciate designers that work with ProtoPie. That's great to hear. Thank you so much for all the tips and for explaining us how you do the handoff at the Washington Post. Let's see, the next one. This one comes from Alex Christensen. Curious to know if you also conduct usability tests at the Washington Post. Do you use ProtoPie for any part of that process?
Yeah, we do. We tend to use usertesting.com in general for like our user testing. kind of maybe as like an initial pass for usability testing. We have like a couple like research guides. We have like 2 like dedicated researchers like on our team, but we as like the designers that are like working on the projects tend to be the ones launching those tests. So they're more there to like help us review, make sure we're not like asking any leading questions. I have tested with like ProtoPie, like where you can send them a link and users like can open it. We've hit like a specifically weird, like ProtoPie actually is like better than trying to get someone to user test on Figma. We've hit like a weird thing with app where like having someone open on their phone, the like Figma won't open the way you want to, and it won't always click. So ProtoPie has actually helped. I did use it for this project. So like I was able to like add that link, have them open it, and then I didn't have to like monitor it. We do also like have moderated like user testing. Like I've led a couple research sessions, like even in the last year. We launched like this, like in this prototype, like this is before we launched a redesign of our homepage. When we launched like the new format of like how our homepage looks, we did that as like a moderated test so that we could like have them like sit and like screen share their phone. But usually like with that user testing, you're able to like ask them to like open this on your phone and screen share. And like, that's kind of like how usertesting.com works. So the short answer is yes, we do use this for usability testing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I think this covers almost all questions related to user testing. So someone is asking related to that. Let's see. Lily Boyce is asking, in user testing for short video content, do you get any negative or hesitant feedback, or is this type of storytelling overwhelmingly positive?
I mean, our user base can be a little bit older, and I think that can be an issue, is like they'll want to like flip their phone, or like, I don't know, or like maybe they don't click on the video. But in general, like when we did that test, we did have people that were like not that 45 is old, but like it was 45 plus. We had like a good chunk that were like over 45, which I think like covers that like larger group, and they still like understood this process. They still open those videos. And I think that again, like that was some of our intent with this, like by it being more immersive, it should still be like accessible and people should want to use it. But I think like what we see with like our user base is like, I'd say 50% of people really like something like audio. 50% really like something like video. And you're going to have people feel really strongly for those 2 things. And then you'll have like that other 50% that just don't, like, they don't care. So the ones that do care about it, I think are like really engaged. But I mean, I think that's like with any feature, like 50% of like that group is like a pretty good number.
True. So, Carolyn, to kind of piggyback on that, also, who identified the need to leverage the concept of shorts? You or the design team, or was there direct research around how different populations are consuming news? How did that all start?
I think it actually may have been like a little bit of like business strategy. I think like in general, like we as like an apps team, like we're able to like see reviews and like be able to like see that content. Like I said, we work with like editorial folks, and I think there was like a lot of investment at the time to bring those videos like more to the forefront. Like they were doing a lot of these like video explainers, and I think saw really good engagement from like a content strategy side. And then that was kind of like then on us to see if like we could test if like there was a hypothesis there, like would it work? And again, like the usability testing showed that people like were really engaged with it. I think it was like 8 of 10 were like very excited about it, and like 2 like really weren't. So again, like that number felt good to us, or like the usability of it was that like people were able to engage if they wanted to. So I think like it maybe started more from like an editorial. This is something we want to invest in. Can we partner with you like in design and product, like to see if there's like actual strategy here? And then like I think at the time we were also like working on, we like had just with like the app, we did like a unification. So there used to be like a bunch of different apps, and now we have like our one like flagship like Washington Post app. And so with that, there were things that were more visual on one of them. And so this was like kind of like a little bit of like a guess, a gamble of like, would this also like be that visual experience that people were missing from that previous app?
Thank you, Emily. Okay, I will try to kind of categorize the questions. We have questions around library components. Let's see. I will take the question that has the most upvotes.
Okay.
Do you feel that ProtoPie helps you save time in the product development process? I know you touched a little bit in your presentation, but yeah.
I definitely do. I mean, I think it's like helped with like VQA, like visual like quality, like assurance, like meeting with like engineering. Like I think it's helped with like selling our stakeholders like how long our cycle then is of like, okay, we're reviewing with them. If they don't understand what I'm presenting, then I need to like go back, figure out how to redo that. And then you don't have like it's another week or two before you're meeting with them. So I think it has like in general save time in that space. I think it's also like save time like once you've like created the prototype, like that's probably your barrier, right? It's like once you've created the prototype, it's the same way of like iterating on like a still screen, like being able to go back in and iterate on that prototype to figure out like why wasn't it like quite working to like the way I wanted it to. But I think it like has saved time in like the long term of it. Like it's made it easier for like, okay, I'm not like trying to go back and forth with my engineers to like dream up like what I was thinking versus I can show them what I was thinking. And that same thing in like kind of that like handoff review approval process as well.
Thank you, Emily. And this also covers another question related to like selling ProtoPie to your senior management. Did senior management understand the benefits of Hifi prototyping directly, or did they just see it as a time sink? Did it take a lot of convincing to get the budget?
Brian, can I let you take this one?
Yeah, sure. I early on I introduced the ProtoPie, like I mentioned early. I think in early when you guys launched your software. And we thought it was a really great opportunity. I think at the time we were before Figma even popped up, we were using Sketch mostly, and we didn't really have access to a lot of different prototyping tools. So any prototyping at the time was like really great. This idea that it can integrate, it was kind of agnostic to tooling in terms of where it could go. So if we wanted to switch like we did to Figma, Sketch was still something that was viable at that current time. So when it came to prototyping, we found that the use case and the time spent in building well fidelity prototyping became not only useful to some of the points that Emily said around like selling this to our stakeholders as well as to the users, but even to our own design managers and leads. When we saw the actual prototype come to life, it really became less of like a theoretical conversation and more about like we started talking about the details, the interaction details and things like that. So I think just spinning up a prototype at first, and like Emily mentioned, if you're using Figma, you should definitely be using prototyping in general. But as you get to high fidelity, you start finding this kind of value in return for the time that you spent, as well as what you get out of it. We definitely try to make sure that if you are going to use some tool like ProtoPie or even prototyping in Figma, that it is meeting a specific need. We don't always encourage to say like spend, an hour or 2 hours just doing this or a whole day, unless it's really like a need that we're trying to do. And so most time it's user testing and things like that. So I think when you are able to showcase like upfront the need, even if you don't have ProtoPie and you're just saying, hey, I'm brushing up against these limitations in Figma, I'm spending this much time, it becomes really apparent to a leadership. And I help in operations in terms of like the tooling that we spend. And I advocated for ProtoPie, and so it's just more of like I don't want our designers spending too much time in Figma trying to create something 600 different ways when they could just be easier done in ProtoPie. And then as well as to the value of like user testing, not jumping through the hoops for our users to test it. So there is a lot of value. And senior management isn't something that's like needs to be convinced. I think it's more so like, do you have the budget for it? And really evaluating from that standpoint.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian. Okay, let's continue. This question comes from Neil O'Brien. What are the main reasons your team chose ProtoPie over Figma for prototyping? Do you use both in your workflow, or do you use ProtoPie exclusively?
We use both. And I think like what Brian kind of like just answered a little bit, like it's kind of like a pick and choose depending on like what barrier there is like with the work. Like we've done things with like our navigation that we've definitely like needed ProtoPie for. We did like some experiments of like if you were to like customize navigation, like or like what do like make some changes to the homepage, we use ProtoPie for that. For a lot of the carousels, it's been like this has been like advantageous because it like allows us to like make the component in Figma and then like bring it over into ProtoPie. And so then like you're not trying to like make 20 different screens that like represent the same thing. And if you click through, then it does that. Whereas like you can actually see like what you're trying to do. So I think that we tend to choose it like over it if it like is part of like the requirement. Like If it's like a carousel, like there's an animation that's needed. If it's a pagination, there's an animation that's needed. If your navigation is sticky, you need to be able to show that. And those are things that are like, I think, much harder to do in Figma. So I think we choose to do this because it ends up being easier, because it like is more proof of concept. But we do use both in our workflow. Like we're working most of the time in Figma.
Okay. Right. Now we have two questions regarding component libraries. How mature would you say Washington Post's ProtoPie components libraries is at the moment, and how often do you work on it? Thank you. From Eduardo.
I think it's young. It's like new.
Yeah, it's relatively new. I mean, I am our design system lead, and as compared to our Figma components that we manage, which we have far greater components in there, we don't necessarily have the one-to-one parity in terms of ProtoPie, but we also make that a specific decision. So say, for example, the carousel being a bit more of a complex feature as it pertains to like maybe the video and having a specific height and these kind of logics baked in. The components that we do have in there are specifically catered to maybe an experience that we're tend to maybe experiment on or maybe make changes to, and we want to have a way to spin up a high fidelity prototype without wasting resources. So Emily showcased in this prototype that we had used components to kind of break down the carousels in more reusable fashion. Say, for example, if Emily needed to swap all of the videos, we can swap them out to do a different testing for like a different scenario. Same is the case, like if we just needed to use the vertical video in terms of like the scrolling and have that experience show up elsewhere in the app. We broke it down into like smaller components. So we're very strategic in terms of where we want to, because the maintenance, just like if you ever manage Figma library, it's the same for component library. Like you need to have the dedicated time and resource to do the upkeep. But once you put it in there, it's kind of nice because you don't have to do it again. So, you know, Emily and I work together to get this prototype have components in there, and now she can reuse it whenever she wants to, like spin up a carousel and things like that. But yeah, very early on.
Got it. Matt and Eduardo, I hope this answers your questions. Now let's move on. Before jumping into ProtoPie, did you set up any motion guidelines that every product designers can follow to maintain a cohesive experience?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't.
Yeah, at this current age, you can actually go to see our design system. We are working on foundations and guidance as like our principles in terms of like a lot of our foundations around motion and animation. And that is something that we actually have currently working on. We just haven't shipped it in live. But we have like some loose guidance right now that, you know, there's certain types of feels and delights that we probably have within our product, especially when Emily's working on stuff. You may not see something like a Google confetti explode and do all these things within like very adjacent to like sensitive news topics. Like that's not something that we would do. So there are some kind of like curated editorial guidance when it comes to motion animation. But for the most part, we are working on some foundational guidance that we'll be launching soon on our site that you guys can also take a look at if you want to later on.
Amazing. Please keep an eye out for that one. Thank you, Brian. The next most upvoted question comes, it's for you, Emily. Emily, do you need real-time collaboration when prototyping? What's your opinion on that?
Ooh, I would love that. Like currently we definitely like switch between like who's working on what screen. Like it's easy for us to share it like with the workspace, but if I could like the way Figma, you could go in this screen together, like that would be great. I have like with like some teammates have like taken like old prototypes and I've like walked them through like over Zoom or like again sitting next to each other if like we're both in office breaking apart a prototype. It would be so cool to like be able to like do that together. I don't know what that would look like, but I'd say that would be fun if you could real-time collaborate with people in prototyping.
Okay. And also related to that, so what are some of the limitations you encountered while using ProtoPie?
I do think it's like a little like you do have to find some resources for like if you're not sure like how to do something, but I don't think it's like hard to find those, but some of them are more like YouTube, or like if it is like the tutorial, maybe like on ProtoPie. I think it's like the more complicated the prototype gets, the more you're like looking for something else. So I don't know, like I feel like that's how I've learned how to use like Figma and Sketch before, is like if I don't know how to do something, I'll kind of like self-start, like go ahead and like do research on how to do it, or like ask someone else, like someone like Brian, who like was like an early adopter on our team, to use it.
The
I
only
think that
limit
like maybe the like how things like import might be my other answer to that. Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna no, I was just gonna jump in and say the only thing like I probably miss like moving from Figma to ProtoPie is like maybe the reordering and auto layouts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is definitely something that is, I wouldn't say a limitation, but it is something you need to work around. So even for this carousel, like I mentioned, like if we wanted to swap a different item for a different height, we have to be very specific in terms like what that height and spacing would be. So it there's workarounds. It's not necessarily a limitation, but it's definitely something that would enhance the experience for a designer and save a lot of our time, because we are thinking that way in Figma. So when we move into there, it's kind of like flexible layout would be very beneficial.
Yeah, or I would say like to elaborate on that, like the import of it, like the issues I've had have been like I need to change, like I make a change in Figma and I need to change the font in ProtoPie, and it breaks like the whole thing, and having to re-import because I like made a teeny change, or like some of like the spacing and stuff. I think that's kind of what Brian's saying as well.
Yeah. So yeah, we are very much aware of that, the whole import export process can be improved, which is why we are currently taking action to improving the whole flow. So yeah, please stay tuned for a improved workflow from exporting from Figma to ProtoPie. So yeah, please stay tuned and keep an eye out on that one. Okay, I think we have time to cover a few more questions. Emily, love the in-depth presentation and live demos. Very interesting to see. My question is, did you have any coding or technical background, or how did you get this advanced?
I have like such limited coding background. So the university that I went to required us to take like one semester of coding. So I understand CSS. That's it. Like I cannot JavaScript. I can like barely understand HTML, but like I do understand like CSS styling. I think some of it's just like a little bit how my brain works, like the backwards engineering, like it's kind of like the take apart things. Like I feel like a lot of people that end up in design are industrial designers, or like, yeah, when I was like little, I would like take things apart and stuff. Like I'm not that person. So I think that there's something about this, about like the learning of it, that I really enjoy. That has made me like become more technical in it, or like I learned how to design like in Adobe. And I think that some of that also has a little bit of a barrier. And so like being able to, again, like backwards engineer, like I remember like making things in Illustrator, like trying to like draw like flowers in Illustrator when I was like in middle school. And so I think that maybe has lended itself to like how I think and learn. I know that there's some people like on our team that like have more coding experience, that maybe just say like human computer interaction. And that makes like the conditionals and stuff like a little bit easier for them. But that's like definitely been like for me, like this like easy to show you like where we are now, but that was maybe like hard for me at the beginning of like learning to use ProtoPie. So like when we worked on this, launched probably in like early 2022. So this like I've been working in ProtoPie for almost 2 years. So
thank you so much, Emily. Okay, so we have 2 more minutes, and yeah, we promised that we would keep this webinar under 1 hour. Thank you so much for graciously handling all of these questions. Thank you for the great questions, everyone. I'm sorry we were not able to cover all of them, but parts of answers to some of the remaining questions, I think they can be found in what has already been presented. So make sure to refer to the recording that will be shared after this webinar. Okay, I think it's time to start wrapping up. Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know. I know there were a lot of questions, a lot of discussions regarding how do I sell ProtoPie to my managers, to my upper management. Yeah, we currently have a Black Friday promotion going on. So make sure to check that out on our website, protopie.io. Click in that banner to learn more, and yeah, make sure to make use of this promotion that's going on. Okay then, and yeah, join ProtoPioneers, our online community of fellow ProtoPie users, designers. This is the best place to get help, share your ideas and experiences, and yeah, don't be a stranger. Please get in touch with us there. Yeah, I want to thank everyone for joining this webinar. We hope you found it informative and engaging. I know I did. Thank you, Emily and Brian, for taking us backstage to the prototyping process at the Washington Post and for showing us how all the magic happens. And yeah, thank you, Rebecca, for the journey into ProtoPie's strongest features. I will see you at the next one. Goodbye.